Hey, I'm Erica Washington. Welcome to MIMS, Make It Make Sense. We are here today, July 1st. Happy July 1st. Can you believe it's already July 1st? The year is almost done. So much has happened. We have been through it over the past few weeks, over the past few years, honestly. But I really want to be thankful for what we have and be thankful for where we are in this moment, knowing that we can do more. So where do we start? Let's start, obviously, with the Black census, my favorite thing to talk about. First things first, have you taken the Black census yet? If not, please go to makeitworknevada.org. It's right there on the screen where it says makeitworknevada.org. Go to our website, click on the Black census. It only takes a couple minutes. Literally, you can get done in like 3 minutes, maybe 5, if you want to take your time. But we want to talk to anyone who identifies as Black, whether you're an immigrant, whether you are a millennial or anything else. We just want to talk to all folks who identify as Black or African American, and we want to know about what you need. We want to know about what you're thinking about, the world of politics, COVID, all of it. Please take the census. We want to talk to at least 1,000 Black folks in Nevada before November, and I know we can do it. So come on, help us out. Hopefully you've seen our billboards. We've got some billboards around town that shows us trying to take the Black census. So hopefully you've seen those too. Anyway, let's move on. What are we talking about today? We are talking about the midterms. So we're still talking about the elections. We're talking to today our Attorney General, Mr. Aaron Ford. He has been our Attorney General for almost the last 4 years, and he is up for re-election this year. Now, as always, we invite all candidates for every race onto the show. No one else responded but our current Attorney General. So this is who we get today. So the community has some questions. I have some questions. We're going to talk to the Attorney General, and we're going to find out, 1, what the heck does he do? And 2, how does it affect us? And 3, what do we need to know before we go to the polls in November? So I look forward to having that conversation. We also will have another special guest at around 1:30. I will introduce her when she gets here. So in the meantime, let's get started with MIMS and our current Attorney General, Aaron Ford. Hello, sir.
Hey there, how you doing?
I am good. How are you?
I'm fantastic. Good to see you. Happy 1st of July, as you said, and
Yeah.
happy beginning of the weekend and the 4th of July. Good stuff.
Right. So we get a long weekend, hopefully.
Yeah,
Hopefully.
right.
I don't know. You're running for office, so that may not mean anything.
Yeah, weekends used to mean something. They don't mean much more in terms of rest these days, that's for sure.
Right. So I want to get started. And like I said in our intro, we invited everyone who was running for this particular seat, and you were the only one that responded. I always say that makes it's really telling folks who reach out, or at least even if they just come back and say, no, I can't, schedule conflict, what have you. Other than that, but we received no responses whatsoever. So I just want to make sure that is loud and clear, because Make It Work Nevada, we always try to do our due diligence, because we think it's important that folks hear from everybody and anybody who is saying that they want their vote. Moving on, Mr. Attorney General, can you start off by telling us what exactly is an Attorney General? What do you do all day?
Listen, it's a great question. I didn't grow up saying I want to be Attorney General, right?
No, and you have so many in your family that are in the legal profession, and both public and private, and so that wasn't one of your goals.
I didn't even know what Attorney General was, right? When I was growing up, that is, and so the opportunity presented itself to look into this arena, and it's an important position. It's one of the most important positions in every state, if you ask me. And it's because, for one, we're the top legal advisors in our state. My clients are the governor, for example, the lieutenant governor, the secretary of state, which was very important during this last election cycle, as you recall, with all of the lawsuits going on around voting and things of that sort. She was my client, and I helped her through all of that. I also advise all of the administrative agencies. And so whether you're talking about the State Board of Education, or you're talking about Health and Human Services, or the Department of Corrections, they're my clients as well. And so I have colleagues, 400 colleagues in my office that I work with, and those are our main jobs. But I'm also the top law enforcement officer in the state, where we have very limited criminal jurisdiction, but we have some criminal jurisdiction where, for example, cyber crimes. That's something that I can prosecute. We can prosecute Medicaid fraud. We can prosecute workers' compensation fraud. We can prosecute child exploitation and sex trafficking and things of that sort. So those are some of the areas that we have jurisdiction on, including any crimes that take place in our state prisons. So that's the second part. But one of the most important parts, from my perspective, is that I'm the people's lawyer. I sue entities that are taking advantage of Nevadans. So consumer protection is a prime example of one of my main responsibilities. When the opioid companies started doing bad things in Nevada, I sued them, and I've been able to get hundreds of millions of dollars in settlement funds to help address the opioid epidemic in our state, because that's part of what my responsibility is. And then finally, I'll say I push back on the federal government sometimes. When not this president, but the last president was in, we had a handful of differences of opinion, so to speak. And I sued the federal government over 24 times, and we won almost every single one of them, because he was just violating the rules, breaking the law, and violating our rights. And so those are some of the things that I do as Attorney General, and some of the things that I want to keep doing. It's the best job I've ever had, and one I'm trying to keep.
Okay. So I want to go right into questions that we asked folks in the community. We went roving around and ended up over on the historic West Side near Mario's, and found some folks, and they want to know, they have a couple questions. So the first question is from a gentleman named Avery.
Avery.
My name is Avery Newman, and my question to you is, what are you going to do about police brutality?
So that's a hot topic that I think we had quite a few people wanting to talk about. So from your seat, what is possible to be done about police brutality and other violence that happens at the hands of law enforcement?
Well, listen, I appreciate that question, Avery. That's my son's name, as I've indicated. So, it's an interesting coincidence, because hearing that question from you is a comparable question I hear from my own children, frankly. And so what I've attempted to do, both in my capacity as Attorney General, but also in my capacity as state senator, which I was before I became Attorney General, is I've attempted to try to improve relationships between law enforcement and the communities that I used to say they serve, but I have a badge, so that we serve. And especially the Black community. And so in the aftermath, for example, of George Floyd, we can now call it a murder. I was very cautious until we got the verdict in, but he was murdered by police officers. And what I did was I used my platform as the top law enforcement officer in the state, as a Black man married to a Black woman, raising 3 Black sons and a Black nephew, to speak truth on that very issue. And I can use the power of convening, which is what we did. I got together over the course of 6 weeks. You may recall this, Erica, what I call the Justice and Injustice Forum, where I got community members in, I got law enforcement, I got church groups, I got the ACLU, I got, you name it. They were in here and on the screen, frankly, because it was during COVID. But 6 weeks in a row, around this time, actually, during 4th of July, because, George Floyd was killed right after my birthday, May 24th of 2 years ago. And so we convene these conversations, and we come up with legislation that I was able to pass, one of which gives my office the ability to investigate police departments who are alleged to be engaging in discriminatory policing. It's called pattern and practice investigations. And so that was one of the things that I did in direct response to the police brutality we saw there in Minneapolis. But to be sure, it happens elsewhere as well. So we have to be cognizant of that fact and not act as though we're perfect in our state, because we're not. And then the second thing I did was to pass a legislation that was directly responsive to what we saw happen to Breonna Taylor in Louisville, Kentucky. I limited the use of no-knock warrants in our state. And so that's some of the things, Avery, that I can do is to pass legislation. And not only did I pass it, Avery, I passed it unanimously. That means every Democrat and every Republican voted in favor of my 2 bills. And they went to the governor's desk, and they were signed by the governor on the anniversary, the 1-year anniversary of George Floyd's murder, May 25th of 2021. And so those are some of the things that I can do. And we continue to have those conversations and just speak truth to power from my position of power about very real issues such as police brutality.
Thank you for that. I didn't realize it was 1 year to the day.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's my mic. The next question is for Stephanie. It's from Stephanie.
Stephanie.
What would you say to the candidates if they were right in front of you?
Basically, I would just ask, like, what can you do for me? Or what are you supposed to do for me? And what steps you're going to take to do it?
So I think with Stephanie, a little bit after that, she spoke to one of our organizers, and she wanted to know, for women, what is it that the Attorney General can do to support women and to advocate for them?
Well, listen, that's another great question, and I appreciate that. The best example I can provide to you of what the Attorney General's office can do for women is something that I'm actually doing, something that started when I was in the state Senate. When I was Senate Majority Leader in 2017, my colleague, Senator Pat Spearman, brought forth the Equal Rights Amendment to be ratified in our state. And if you didn't know, the Equal Rights Amendment is the amendment that says that women have equal rights to men. It had not to that point been ratified, and it was not part of our Constitution. She tried to do it 2 years before, but the Republicans wouldn't bring it up for a vote. But under my leadership, we brought it up for a vote and we passed it. Now, the reason why I mention that is because now that I'm Attorney General and it has been passed in 2 other states, including Virginia and in Illinois, I am actually litigating. I'm in court right now trying to enforce the ratification of the Equal Rights Amendment, which predominantly helps women, obviously, when it comes to equality in our country. And so what it is that the Attorney General can do is, for women in particular, is advocate for the ERA. Let me tell you how important elections are. The lawsuit that I'm engaged in right now, it's against the archivist from the federal government because the President Trump's administration wouldn't recognize it. It's us, it's Illinois, and it was Virginia. Virginia had an election last year, and their Democratic Attorney General lost to a Republican Attorney General. That Republican Attorney General withdrew Virginia from the litigation. That's why it's important that you have an Attorney General who's going to look out for you, because now there are only 2 states who are litigating it, and it's me and it's Illinois. Now we have other states that are helping us and that are supporting us. They happen to be all represented by Democratic Attorneys General, but that's the importance of elections, recognizing that the Virginia elections led to them being removed from the litigation that's trying to defend the Equal Rights Amendment. But at the end of the day, it's about the Attorney General understanding that we have to represent and protect the dignity and humanity of everyone in our state, everyone in our state. And that means if you've been here for 3 generations or for 3 days, you deserve equal protection. Whether you've been here and married with three children, 2.5 children, or a single parent with 1 kid, should be protected equally. Whether you are black or white, you should be protected equally. And that's something that the Attorney General should be doing, and that I advocate to do, and absolutely do in my capacity as Attorney General.
So
big old kid.
I want to ask, before we go to the next question, why is it taking so long to ratify the ERA? This has been going on before I was born. Yeah. Why is it taking so long for something that sounds as simple as equal rights for women? Yeah.
Well, you're right. The effort began the year I was born in 1972, and it's been going on ever since. In order to ratify a constitutional amendment, you have to get a certain percentage of all of the United States, all of the states in our union to ratify that in their own particular state. We didn't ratify it, until 2017. It was brought for a vote, right? And we tried to do it. I want to say in the maybe in the 70s or in the 80s, but it didn't pass. So we brought it back, and so that's what it is. It's taken this amount of time for enough states in order to say yes, we agree to add the Equal Rights Amendment to our U.S. Constitution. And what the arguments are on the other side is that there was a deadline, I believe, I can't remember off the top of my head, of 8 years or so, where if you didn't get enough states within 8 years, then it was over. Then you got to start all over again. So that's the argument that the other side is making, is that we ran out of time to do it. And our argument is that Congress can't put a prescription of time on when the states are going to consider a ratification of an amendment. And so that's one of the arguments that we're making.
I see. Okay, thank you for that. Our next question comes from a gentleman named As Ryan, and he has his question for you.
And my question is, what would the Attorney General do for race equality?
Okay, pretty clear on that. What can you do about racial equality?
I mean, I think I referenced back to what I said after George Floyd's murder. I know that was particularly related to police interactions with the African American community, with the Black community. But I think more broadly speaking, I endeavor to just speak truth to power from my position of power, ensuring that everyone in the Nevada family, and I've laid it out for you as broadly as I could, is treated equally and fairly in our state. I'm the first Black Attorney General, the first Black person to win a statewide constitutional office in the history of our state, and I think that says a lot relative to the fact that our state does in fact believe in opportunity and equality, but we have to continue fighting for that, and that's one of the things that I do. I don't shy away from the tough conversations around these issues. I feel as though I'm here for a particular reason, and one of those reasons is to just tell the truth about stuff, and that includes equal rights and equal treatment for everyone in our state.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Scott.
Hi, I'm Scott. My question is, why are they handing out such harsh punishments for nonviolent drug offenders?
Okay, so it's been a hot topic too around, especially around marijuana and other things. But he wants to know about nonviolent drug offenses and why they are treated so harshly.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think there's been a lesson learned relative to the war on drugs that's been waged for decades now. And, to your point, people are trying to change that now. It's a change that the legislature has already undertaken. I want to say it was 2019 when they passed a big bill that dealt a lot with sentencing relative to certain offenses, including drug offenses, trying to rectify and remedy some of the disproportionate impacts that it's having on particular communities, but just generally speaking, this notion of certain crimes being treated so harshly when they should be treated as addictions or as illnesses, so that folks can get the treatment that they need and then be restored to society. So, I think what we're seeing is the remnants of a decades-long fight, the war on drugs that President Nixon announced in the early 70s, maybe late 60s. We're still seeing the remnants of that. But we're also seeing an effort to change that and to redirect some of the focus to treatment again, because some of this is related to addiction and other mental, and maybe even a mental health issue. Those are things may be co-occurring, and so I think that we should commend folks for looking into that as an approach as well.
Thank you. I think it's really important that when we talk about drugs and when we talk about nonviolent crimes and all around that, there's a deeper issue. Usually there's a root to it. And sometimes imprisonment is not the answer. Sometimes we have to figure out how do we get to the root of the problem. And I think that's really important. Our next question, our final question is from someone you may recognize. This is Derek.
Hey, I'm Derek. I'd like to know for the candidate, what are you going to do to protect LGBTQ rights? I am a gay man, and I'm petrified that Clarence Thomas has signaled that after abortion rights, he's coming after gay marriage. What are you going to do?
Okay. There's been a lot of conversation around the Supreme Court and quite a few of their rulings. But yes, there's a lot of folks who are wondering what's next.
Yeah. Hey, Derek, good to see you. Hopefully you're watching and you can wave back at me right now.
You better be watching.
You're right to be petrified. You are right to be petrified. The truth of the matter is we all should be petrified because, yes, Clarence Thomas signaled that gay marriage may be on the chopping block, for lack of a better phrase, that the right to use contraception might be on the chopping block. Now, noticeably absent from his statement was something else that is going to be on the chopping block, and that's the right to interracial marriage. It's going to be on the chopping block, as are any other rights that are based on this notion of privacy that underlaid the right that Roe v. Wade announced relative to abortion care. And so what am I going to do? What I've always done, fight and ensure that at least in our state of Nevada, we're all represented. Look, I talked about dignity and humanity. I'll just reference in passing that one of the individuals running against me for this office doesn't particularly care about my humanity, because she says she wants to see me hanging from a crane.
Mm.
You understand? And so when you talk about dignity and humanity, it's important for an attorney general to represent that and to respect that. And I'm going to stand up for not only my own dignity and humanity, but Derek, yours as well as an LGBTQ member of the LGBTQ community. And you can't say gay in Florida, right? You can't get affirmative care in Texas, right? They are coming after any and every right that we hold dear and that we fought years to obtain. And so it's important that when you elect the attorney general this next go around, that it is someone that is representing and respecting everyone's dignity and humanity. And that's Aaron Ford.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that that along with what I heard around the Supreme Court, and maybe you can help explain it a little bit, there was also a ruling around our Miranda rights. And so the Supreme Court has said that we, anyone can't sue a police officer for not giving someone their Miranda rights, which has always been since that court case, which was Miranda versus Arizona in the, I think, late 1960s. I want to say it was 1968. And that a police officer has to tell you your rights because it goes along to our Fifth Amendment, the right to not incriminate ourselves, if I remember my government classes right here. But I think, but now, you still have those rights, if I understand correctly. However, they can negate to tell you, and that just be okay. What is it about this ruling that could be an issue for us?
Yeah, it's a great question. And, so there are two parts to the Miranda side of things, one of which is in the criminal context, right?
Mhm.
And that's what the case of Miranda versus Arizona was about, whether a person who wasn't told their rights could, it said something incriminating, if that can be used in a criminal prosecution against them. And the answer was no, it could not in a criminal prosecution. The question in this recent case was whether a person whose rights were violated under Miranda, if they could sue civilly, like the officer who violated the Miranda rights. And the court has said, no, you can't sue civilly, but you will still have the criminal protection where they can't use that to prosecute you if they violated Miranda. And so in some level, you still have protections in the criminal context, but you have less of an ability to enforce or to dissuade those who would violate the Miranda warnings because they won't be able to be held civilly liable, meaning you can't get, they can't be sued for money or something like that.
Can they be sued for anything else though?
No, not on the civil side. Absolutely not. Right. What the Supreme Court has ultimately said is that the remedy for a Miranda violation is found in the criminal context, not in the civil context. Am I making sense there?
Yeah, you are. But
That's what
it
they
still
said.
feels wrong.
I hear you. Right. I hear you. Right. Because one of the biggest deterrents to doing something wrong is that you might get sued in the civil court. Right. But now that threat has been removed because of the Supreme Court's case there. And there were just questions among the different courts as to whether it was proper to use a violation of Miranda rights in the civil context under what they call 1983 actions. It's a statute that's called 42 U.S.C. 1983, where you can sue government officials who violate certain constitutional rights. And so, it's a longer conversation, but that's the gist of it all.
Okay. Another question for you, and some folks have asked us, and then Derek brought it up again this morning, actually. The Nevada GOP chairman, Michael McDonald, not to be confused with the soul singer Michael McDonald, has been subpoenaed around the 2020 election fraud claims with the Trump administration. Because he is in the state of Nevada, and does it have anything to do with our Secretary of State? Is there something as the Attorney General can do to prosecute those who pushed on the thoughts of voter fraud, who made these claims and had these false electors and what have you? What can you do to help with this?
No, listen, I appreciate the question, and I've gotten it ever since it was announced that they announced their intentions in that regard. My response has to be consistent and the same. And that is, my office never acknowledges or denies the existence of an investigation, right? what I have said is, and that's period. That's in this instance, that's, criminal investigation. That's me looking. I don't comment on whether I'm investigating or not, for a lot of reasons, including the sanctity of our investigations if we are having one. But what I have said, and what I will say to you is, we're not oblivious to the news. It's on our radar, right? We know it's out there. And what I've also said is, the federal government has announced that they are investigating this issue, and with them making their formal announcement, I have said that my office will be and is happy to work with the federal authorities as they investigate this issue. So that's the limit and extent of what I can say. Simply because, again, as a matter of consistency, I don't want to treat this case or this matter any differently than any other matter, because the minute I do that is the minute someone's going to say that there's some unfair treatment going on here, or there or something malicious or malign going on, and I'm not trying to do that.
I hear you. Okay. So, one other question I had for you, kind of actually going back a little bit to the conversation around Miranda rights and the Supreme Court. There have just been so many explosive, I always want to call them verdicts, and I know they're not verdicts, opinions that come down from the Supreme Court. Is there anything on your radar, anything that should be on the public's radar around things that are headed to the Supreme Court, things that will affect us, that because I feel like we play a lot of defense and not a lot of offense. Like, how do we get ahead of making sure that our rights are not infringed on, that we don't lose the freedoms that we feel like we have as we're going into this July 4th weekend?
Yeah, no, listen, I appreciate that question. I'm gonna answer it in two different ways. We're still analyzing the impacts or the decisions themselves that came down, so that we can see what impact. For example, there was a gun decision that came down that really only addressed issues in 6 states. New York had a gun law that said you have to
concealed weapon.
Yeah, it was guns. Dealing with guns and whether you can have a gun in public. And so I'm analyzing that case to see if it has anything to do with our laws in our state, because we have a handful of restrictions on gun laws. So we're looking at that. The abortion case, obviously, we're trying to see what type of impact it has on our state. And we've talked about that a little bit. The Miranda stuff you're talking about. But now what we will be doing is analyzing the docket that has been approved for the next session. And we're not in a position to be able to right now announce what our concerns or analysis will be in that regard. But there's a very general answer to your specific question about what you can do to protect your rights. And I know you do it, and I know your viewers do it, and let's go vote. Remember that as difficult, I know, right? People can be dissatisfied, unsatisfied, disappointed in those that you elect sometimes who can't and don't do everything they say that they were going to do, or whatever the case may be. But you still got to go vote, because the alternative, frankly, is losing to someone who's been playing a long game for a long time. And this Roe v. Wade case is a prime example where people were told to go vote in 2016 for an individual who would appoint Supreme Court justices that would support the right to reproductive freedom, because the Supreme Court was in jeopardy. But people kind of discarded that, and they didn't do what they needed to do. And we got Mr. Trump instead, and he ended up appointing 3 folks who have now, for the first time in the history of our country, removed a constitutional right from people in this country. And I think it's important to know that that could have been avoided, and we can avoid. By the way, the people who just prevailed last Friday on this issue a week ago, they've been working on this for 50 years. Ever since Roe v. Wade was announced in 1973, they've been working ever since then to get it reversed. And so play the long game, go out and vote, and continue to work your strategy as you do, through these MEMS conversations and through your organization, Erica, to prevail at the end of the day in protecting the rights.
Thank you for that. I think that it is really important that we push the get out the vote. And we've consistently done that. But more so than that, I think folks need to know that there, are big ripple effects and small ripple effects. Some stuff you see right away and some stuff you don't see for 3 or 5 years, but your vote does count and it does matter. the last question I have for you before we get into the next part of our conversation is just a little, like, we talked a lot about what it is to be attorney general from the serious side, but what's fun about being the attorney general? Like, what's exciting or maybe amazed you that you didn't know about the job beforehand?
Now, listen, there's a lot. There's a lot of answers to that question. The first thing, that the most amazing thing to me, frankly, and this is going to sound kind of braggadocious, but I don't mean it that way, is how comfortable I felt once I got the position, working in the position. I felt like I'm doing exactly what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm right where I'm supposed to be. God had a plan, and I am the Attorney General for this time, during these issues, during these days, addressing these issues, right? The alternative to me in this position during George Floyd, we wouldn't have had, I don't believe, the exact same, response. Certainly not the exact same response. The alternative to me in this office during the last election cycle and the lawsuits that took place, it'd have been different if it weren't me counseling our Secretary of State, in my estimation, at least, right? So it seems to me that I'm right where I'm supposed to be, and that's one of the most amazing things for me, because I feel very comfortable and at ease of what I'm doing. But the funnest parts, frankly, are recognizing the ability to help as many folks as quickly as possible on as many issues as possible, as frequently as I can, and I get to do that working with a cadre of a whole office of 400 colleagues who are helping. Kyle George, who's my number 2 in the office. He's a good buddy of mine, and we work real well together, pursuing justice, which is the job in this office. I say our job is justice. You've heard me say that before. That's our motto. Our job is justice, and that's the funnest part of what I do, seeking justice and all that we do.
How big is the AD?
About 400 in total. I got about 175, 180 lawyers, and the rest are the real bosses in the office who help the lawyers get the job done.
That's a lot. That's a lot of work.
Yeah.
We're still waiting for our other guest to come on. I'm hoping that she is going to be able to make it. But in the meantime, I don't want to, and just in case she can't, I don't want to miss this opportunity to have the conversation about Roe versus Wade and what that means for the state. Now, most people know that Nevada has abortion rights in our Constitution. And so people have said that a lot, and that we are a safer state and all of that. But what does that really mean? And does the Roe versus Wade reversal mean anything for Nevada at all?
Yeah, well, first off, it's not in our Constitution. I want to be clear about that. I know one of the other individuals running for this office didn't know that. She misspoke, said it was in our Constitution. It is not, has not been. It is a statutory right that we have, one that was passed in 1990. We codified Roe v. Wade in statute in a way that makes it impossible for the state legislature to change it. But it makes it possible. The only way it can be changed is if the people in the state of Nevada vote to remove it from our statutes. So what is codified is the right to seek an abortion up to 24 weeks in our state, with certain exceptions beyond that if a doctor kind of requires it, right? But that's it. The limit, that number, that week limit is in there. But people shouldn't get complacent. They shouldn't get complacent because we've codified 24 weeks worth of 24 weeks of abortion rights into our statute, because they can work around the edges to curb that right. And we've seen people do that. I mean, in 2015, when I was the minority leader, there were bills that were being sponsored that did violate the 24-week requirement, but certainly would have put a barrier in front of someone seeking to exercise that right. Notification requirements, or just so many different things that, and I don't want to put it into the atmosphere because I don't want to give them ideas, right? I'm not naive enough to think that they don't already have it already laid out. I know that they do, but I'm not going to say it out loud. How about that? But like I said, we can't be naive, we can't be complacent, and we can't think that they haven't been lying in wait for a Roe v. Wade to be overturned so that they can attack even the statutory right that exists in our state. And I know that they're doing it because they tried it in 15. So that's on the one hand. On the second hand is you also have a federal government where you have Republicans, frankly, who are looking to pass a 6-week ban on abortion, if not a nationwide ban on abortion. And they would do that in a way that would I was going to say Trump, bad choice of words, but it would nullify essentially our state statute. It would trump our state statute. And so we could lose our state protections if the federal government goes the wrong way in the state Senate and in the presidency and in the pardon me, in the I said state Senate, in the U.S. Senate and the U.S. Congress and in the state and U.S. presidency. If it goes the wrong way, our state protections can go away as well. So again, don't be complacent and don't be fooled by people who are telling you it has no impact on our state. They're lying to you. They're trying to lure you into complacency and then sneak up on you and then take away a right or put up a particular barrier to that right. How do I know that? Because the moment the decision came out a week ago Friday, I saw Nevada Rights of Life send an email out talking about essentially Nevada's next. Right? They're looking for ways to undermine the right. And not to mention the fact that, again, one of the opponents running against me, Segal Chapa, has said point blank, well, I shouldn't say she said point blank. She said that she wants to apply enhanced penalties to women who are seeking an abortion, right? And so you should look into her positions on this, because she says she will defend the laws and constitutions and the rights, even if she doesn't agree with them. But she's already said on the other side of her mouth that she won't. And then she also wants to essentially prosecute and imprison women who would seek an abortion. So these are things that we have to keep in mind as we move forward.
Okay. Thank you for that. And I would like to apologize about my mic. I have no idea. This is the first time our mic sounded like this. It's raggedy. But we're going to continue the conversation anyway. And I would like to bring on our special guest, Dr. Toni Bond, who is also a local Las Vegas resident. But she has also worked tirelessly for more than 20 years around abortion rights and reproductive justice. She's the former president of Black Women for Reproductive Justice, the first woman of color to be the executive director of the Chicago Abortion Fund, and a leader of the Trust Black Women Collective. And her life has been creating a society where Black women are healthy, have healthy families, and live in healthy communities. I'd like to welcome Dr. Toni Bond.
Hi, thank you for having me on your show, and thank you for your patience.
No problem, Dr. Bond. How are you?
I'm well, thank you, and yourself?
We are doing well. Sorry we can't see your sweet face, but we're going to take all of your wisdom and words and help lead us into what we should be doing next.
Oh, you're far too kind.
So we've been talking with our Attorney General, Mr. Aaron Ford, here for the last 37 minutes about a plethora of things happening in the state and happening from the Supreme Court, including Miranda rights and gun rights, and obviously Roe versus Wade and how that would affect Nevada. And he's talked about it from a legal standpoint, but from a reproductive justice standpoint, can you tell us what Nevadan residents should be thinking about with this opinion from the Supreme Court that's come down?
Absolutely. Well, the first thing I'd like to start with, that this isn't just about abortion access. This isn't just about abortion rights. This is about access. This is about attacks on democracy. Because as the opinion, when Justice Thomas in his reply, he talked about a number of things. He talked about going after contraception. He talked about going after marriage equality. We've heard folks talk about bringing up Plessy versus Ferguson. And so this is about an attack on democracy overall. This is about an attack on people's human rights. But specifically as it relates to Roe v. Wade, this is the first time that the court has taken away a right. And so we need to we have to go back to where this all started even. This attack actually started, if you think about it, the planning for it, from anti-choice fundamentalist conservatives. You'd actually have to go back to during the time of Jimmy Carter's presidency and go back to how they organized. They organized originally around segregation laws. And they came upon abortion as a rallying cry for their constituents. And so it isn't really even about trying to protect the life of the unborn, because if you were trying to protect the life of the unborn, you would also be creating the policies to create the conditions for families to do more than just survive, but to thrive. You'd be talking about access to housing and a living wage and food security and all of those various things. So, this is how we know it's not just about protecting the life of the unborn. And when we talk about when we there's so many moving parts to this that still need to be fleshed out. So, for example, we know that Nevada had codified the right to abortion up to 24 weeks in the early 90s. But in the states where there are trigger laws, in places like Utah and Idaho, and even in Ohio, when we go to the Midwest, Missouri and Kansas and states like that, you're talking about a full out assault on women and pregnant capable people's reproductive and sexual autonomy. I was listening to the news just the other day and saw that one of the hospital systems, St. Luke Hospital System in Kansas, is no longer going to provide emergency contraception to rape survivors. And so there's an element of, I don't know what to call it. There's an element of just maliciousness. And I think of it as evil intent and a desire to punish people for their reproductive and sexual choices. And so we need to look at that as well. So this is so much more about this is more than about abortion, but again, an attack on people's overall human rights. And so, what we have to begin to think about, who are the individuals that will be targeted? And we know historically it's Black and Brown people who will be targeted. So, we know it'll be Black and Brown women and pregnant capable people. We still need to look at, I mean, fortunately, in Nevada, our governor has passed the executive order to protect out of state patients and medical providers from prosecution and extradition to states that criminalize abortions. But that still isn't hard and fast, right? What's to preclude anybody from moving forward, because that law hasn't been codified. But that isn't the same case in other states. And so, how do we create systems to protect people as they are trying to obtain abortion care? So, what is to stop a state from going after someone in a sanctuary state, like, and I'll use for example Nevada and even Illinois? What's to stop someone from a hostile state from saying they're going to go after an individual in a sanctuary state who's providing, I don't know, housing or transportation assistance or even money to get an abortion? How do we know they're not going to go after those people? So we need to begin to think about this in a much larger way. It's not just the patients who they want to go after. It's also the providers, and it's not just the physicians and the clinicians, but it's also frontline clinic staff. And then it's also the advocates who they are trying to go after as well. So we need to expand our thinking and and from that begin to expand our strategy in terms of how we are going to protect not just the patients but the providers and even the activists, the grassroots activists who are trying to create resources and systems to enable people to get the reproductive health care that they need.
Thanks. I think something you said made me think about. You said that they've been working on this since the Carter's administration, and this question can go for both of you all. Should we have saw this coming, and did you see it coming, and how long ago did you see it, and why are we always on the offense or on the defense instead of the offense? I guess that's all one question, but it's a lot of questions at the same time. It's just like, why did it feel like such a shock to so many people?
Well, it certainly wasn't a shock to me and to Black reproductive justice activists. We saw this coming. This has been in the works again since the Carter administration, but to fast forward it a little bit, the reality is that Roe has never been a reality for Black Indigenous communities of color because of the Hyde Amendment, which was passed in 75, 76, which precludes the use of government funding only in certain exceptions. Now, like Roe is now, states can choose to use Medicaid funding and other government funding to cover abortion services for low income people, but in other states that is not the case. So we have to go back to the passage of the Hyde Amendment, and women of color, Black women especially, when the Hyde Amendment was passed, said to the broader reproductive health and rights movements, listen, we have got to deal with the Hyde Amendment. We have to get the Hyde Amendment repealed. And we were constantly told from, the reproductive health and rights activists that either it wasn't the right time, we didn't have the support in Congress. And so what that meant was that for low income people, the reality of Roe was still very difficult to realize. And so that's why we had things like abortion funds be created to provide financial assistance to low income women, particularly young women and women of color. So we have to go all the way back there. And also the fact that the conservative anti-choice movement is extremely well funded, much better funded than we are.
Mm-hmm.
And they also take the time to strategize. That is something we have not had the luxury of. We don't have access to the same amount of funding. And because we've always been trying to, fight the good fight and toe the line on the rights that we have had, we haven't had the luxury to be able to go off and plan this multifaceted, multi-pronged strategy like they have. So I mean, that's just some of the variables, but now I think it necessitates for us to take a pause for however bad this moment seems. This is actually an opportunity for us to take a pause and come up with a multi-pronged strategy.
Okay. Attorney General Ford, anything to add?
Yeah, listen, she kind of said it all, and I think very eloquently to boot. The the short answer to your question of should we see it coming is yes, and why didn't we do anything about it is, my mama used to say, or my grandma used to say, people don't think fat meat greasy. I don't know if you know what that means, but yeah, we saw it coming, and you didn't believe us. I mean, we would like I said earlier, Erica, 2016. We told you during that, not you, but we were telling people during this election that be careful. The Supreme Court's on the ballot right now. And we see it coming because they've been working on this ever since Roe v. Wade was decided in 73. We've seen extreme examples of legislation passed in certain states that have made, and they pass it on purpose because they want to get to the Supreme Court when the Supreme Court is more conservative so that they can chip away at Roe v. Wade. All the way up into including what they did last week, which was to get rid of Roe v. Wade. But people didn't think fat meat was greasy. They didn't listen. And at the end of the day, we are reaping, unfortunately, what we've sown in regards of not being proactive and ensuring that we elect someone who can appoint to the bench folks who support reproductive health care and the right to an abortion. And so we now have to figure out ways to respond. And we have valid ways to respond. The second response that I'll offer, and then I'll give you the mic back, is this. Here's one thing I've noticed. I've been minority leader in the state Senate, and I've been majority leader in the state Senate. And I'll tell you, I'm a mimic what I think was attributed to LBJ. The difference between being in the majority and the minority is the difference between chicken salad and chicken. I'll let you fill in the rest of that. But because sometimes in the minority, you can't get anything done. But here's what I've noticed. Republicans use whatever power they have, period. If they are when I was majority leader, I had a minority Republican caucus that wouldn't give me the vote I needed to pass a tax, for example. They stood together and they exercised their power. And when I was a minority leader and they were the majority, they exercised their power in a way that would cram legislation down our throats. They could care less what we argued about, what we said our constituents wanted. They even changed the rules with 2 weeks left in session, maybe with 3 weeks left in session. They just changed them outright because I was using the rules in a way to benefit us. And I was like, well, you know what? I'm just going to change the whole rule. I'm just going to like throw out all the rules and enact brand new ones. That's the kind of stuff that they've done. And I give you that as an example of what we don't do. We as Democrats, we don't exercise the power that we have when we have it. I, for one, am doing that as Attorney General because I know that this job is temporary. It's either 1 term or 2. I get it. And so I'm going to do all that I can with the time that I have this position, irrespective of, of the naysayers and those who are going to call me anything but a child of God. So, these are some of the lessons that are to be learned from what has happened to us this Supreme Court term, which has been so horrendous on so many different fronts. And we're talking about Roe v. Wade now, but as you indicated, Erica, there's so many other decisions that came down. We could have prevented so many of them by being proactive in 2016 and electing a person to the White House who could have appointed different Supreme Court justices.
Yeah, I thank you for that. I think also something that's coming up for me is the conversation around Nevada being a safe space for abortion rights, which I think is great, but also knowing that we have very few doctors per capita here as compared to a lot of other states. I know we're sort of at the bottom of that list. And when it comes to abortion clinics, we only have about 9 in the state. I believe it's 2 in Reno, 7 in Las Vegas area, Clark County, Southern Nevada, I should just say. Is that going to be a concern as far as folks coming in, influx of folks needing services and us wanting to be able to provide said services, but not having enough for folks here as well as the folks that may be coming from Texas or wherever? And this question can go really for both of you, but I'll start with you, Dr. Bond.
I think it's certainly a concern. It's a concern in all of the states that find themselves in the very precarious, and I say precarious position of being a sanctuary state. One, the influx of women and pregnant capable people who are needing abortion care. But also we really have to begin to think about the security risk too to providers. We know that there have been reports already of folks being harassed. We know that, for instance, in Texas, members of the LGBTQ plus community are facing increasing amounts of harassment. And so we need to think about that as well for our sanctuary states. What are the safety concerns for providers? And again, that is a part of the conversation, and I think we haven't really had a chance to flesh out like we need. I mean, listen, we've got reproductive justice activists who are walking around with security detail, and people are beginning to think about how they need to scrub their personal information from the internet. We've got folks showing up at rallies, the very nondescript people showing up at rallies. And so all of this is, I think, forcing us to think about the provision of reproductive health care, particularly abortion care, in a very different way that we haven't had to think about really. And but so we have to add that on to the influx of, or the demand that sanctuary states are going to receive, particularly states like Nevada and states like especially Illinois. Illinois is like the donut, right, in the Midwest that's surrounded by 6 states that have abortion bans. And so they not only have to provide care for folks coming from those states, but we'll also see people coming from the south, from southern states, just as Nevada will. And so, yeah, I don't know that the sanctuary states are as prepared as they need to be, but it's certainly, part of that overall strategy, that multi-pronged strategy that we'll have to take that pause to figure out how we come up with. I hate to sound so pessimistic.
No, it's not pessimism. It's realism. I mean, it's fact of the matter. It's truth. And I couldn't have said it any better. We do know, our providers have told us that they saw an uptick in service requests after the bounty law passed in Texas. We anticipate that we will see an uptick now that Roe v. Wade has been overturned. Idaho, one of our border states to the north, is talking about banning travel for women, which they'll get sued over, but also banning pills being sent to them, right? And so we can expect services from all over the place, no question, or service requests from all over the place. And on the provision side, I'll leave that conversation to Dr. Bond and the service providers. But on the security side, which she's mentioned, there's certainly something that's on the Attorney General's, on my office's radar, relative to conversations we're having with, and we'll be having with, the federal government, that we'll be having with our local law enforcement and our colleagues all over the place, because we do have to have concern about the protection of facilities, providers, but also the patients. And we're certainly cognizant of that fact.
And the activists. I mean, now I'm thinking, when I get a request to come someplace and speak, I'm asking different questions. Where am I coming? Who's the audience? And what kind of security are you going to have? And now, even, are you going to provide some detail? Because we have to begin to think that way. We need only look at what happened in Buffalo. And so we have to think about how we're creating this shield of protection for everybody, the patients, the providers, and the activists.
I think that is very true. And it's also very scary to think about just wanting to advocate for human rights could get you hurt. I want to wrap up. We're running out of time, but I'm really thankful that you all were here to have this conversation. And the last question I want to ask, which is never fair because it's never enough time to answer whatever last question comes into my brain, but I started thinking about sex education, and something that Make It Work has worked on, other organizations in the state have worked on, having comprehensive sex education in the state of Nevada. And with Roe versus Wade now being overturned and us not having this, what will be some of those consequences, and how do we, again, be on the offense and think ahead to be able to have these important conversations, pass important policies, so that we can avoid maybe an influx of teen pregnancies and babies that they may or may not be able to take care of? I'll start with you, Attorney General.
Listen, that's such a great question. And I think, it's not quite proactive, because frankly, it's reactive. It's reactive to the fact that Roe v. Wade has not been overturned. And our reaction needs to be to now proactively educate our youth about that fact, that, it's all the more important for people to understand safe sex, for them to understand the reproductive system, and for them to understand what their rights are in our state, but how they may be different elsewhere, right? And so, again, it's reactive in the sense that it's in response to what happened to Roe, but we should be vocal to our children. And you have sons and daughters, you should be talking to them about what the ramifications are of this decision, and what it could mean in real life. So that's my response.
I would echo what the Attorney General said. It's particularly the piece about education around reproductive health. We make the assumption that people understand their bodies, and we need to include very basic around reproductive health 101. What does it mean to understand the menstrual cycle? When do you ovulate? We need to really educate people on how to control their fertility. The other piece, and you're going to be mad with me about this, Erica, we have to begin to have I know, right? I'm going to drop this when you're getting ready to end. We have to figure out how to bring in members of our religious and faith-based community, particularly the Black faith-based community, to have these tough conversations and to start standing on the right side around conversations about reproductive and sexual health, and also about broader democratic rights and human rights, and a conversation about what it means that the Supreme Court has overturned Roe v. Wade and taken away women and pregnant capable people's bodily autonomy.
I'm not mad at you. I think that we need to have these conversations anywhere and everywhere when at all possible, and I appreciate, as a mother of three, that my children will come to me and have important conversations. Sometimes I feel like too much conversation, but it's better than none at all. But I know that there are a lot of children out there, a lot of young people who don't have that same opportunity to have open conversation and ask the questions, and feel comfortable and okay doing that. And we need to make sure our children do feel comfortable and okay asking us about their bodies, asking us about consent, asking us about things that, and them being okay with it, saying that they're not ready for something, or they feel like they're ready for something, and then being able to take the responsible steps forward. It has been a great hour, and I appreciate, more than both you, Dr. Bond, and the Attorney General, Aaron Ford, for spending this time with us and, educating our community on what's happening. There's so many other things going on. We could have another hour for the conversation about, just life in general. And hopefully we can bring you all back. Hopefully we'll have some better news, and we'll pass some great policies that people will feel protected and they will feel safe in their communities. But in the meantime, hopefully both of you have taken the Black census. If not, I will make sure I text it to you. And hopefully to our audience, everyone has taken the time to take the Black census. Also, don't forget, this is an election year, and the election will be coming around the corner. It doesn't feel like it, but again, it's already July, and early vote starts October 22nd, and general election day is November 8th this year. Please make sure that you vote. Please make sure that you ask the questions. If there are candidates that you want to see on Make It Make Sense, please let us know, because we'd like to have any and all on to have the conversations that you want to have, so you can know what it is they plan on doing for you and in your community. Also, we will be linking in the comments the Wild West Access Fund of Nevada, which is an abortion fund here in Nevada. If anyone needs information on that, it will be in a link in the comments of this program. So again, thank you, Attorney General Ford, and thank you, Dr. Bond, for being a part of Make It Make Sense today on July 1st. Thank y'all.
Thank you. It was great.
Thank you.
Bye.